Hello and welcome back for another historic video. Today we're going to be taking a look at this elf tribal deck. And today I think we're going to try to do things a bit differently than normal. We're going to start off with this deck that you see in front of you, which is very close to the standard shell these days for elves. And then after a handful of games, I'm going to switch over to a slightly modified version of the deck, and we can compare how the two perform in today's gameplay. The premise of this deck is to win with combat damage, and we have a handful of mana dorks that will help us ramp out a wide board, and then we will be trying to pump up our team using a few different creatures to deal lethal combat damage. So starting with the mana dorks, at 1 mana we have both the Elvish Mystic and the Llanowar Elves. Both of these are 1/1 creatures that tap to add a green mana. Then at 2 mana, we have 1 copy of Rofellos, Llanowar Emissary. For 2 green mana, this legendary 2/1 elf taps and adds a green for each forest that you control. Our mana base in this deck is entirely made up of forests, so we're usually able to add 3 or 4 mana at a minimum. Notably, due to Rofellos, we will not be playing any of the Cavern of Souls. And then, arguably the better version of this card, we have 4 copies of Priest of Titania. This 2 mana 1/1 taps and adds 1 green for each elf on the battlefield. This also counts elves on your opponent's side of the field if we are in the mirror match. Most notably, Priest of Titania will generate significantly more mana than Rofellos will, which is why it is considered the better of the 2 cards. And then in this deck, the last mana dork that we have is the Elvish Archdruid. This one costs 3 mana, but due to our 8 1-drop ramp cards, we can often play it out on turn 2. And it is a Lord, giving all of our other elf creatures +1/+1. And then similar to the Titania, you can tap it and add 1 green for each elf that we control. So this is only looking at our side of the battlefield. Then for some of the support cards that we have, there are 4 copies of Allosaurus Shepherd. This 1 mana 1/1 can't be countered, and it also makes our other green spells uncounterable. So this allows us to not necessarily need to play the Cavern of Souls when coming up against control decks. And potentially this can also get around things like a Chalice of the Void. Additionally, Allosaurus Shepherd has a 6 mana ability that states, until end of turn, each elf creature we control has a base power and toughness of 5/5. Another card we have in the deck that's able to pump up our creatures is the Elvish Warmaster. This 2 mana 2/2 states that whenever 1 or more elves we control enter the battlefield, we get to create a 1/1 green elf warrior token. And this ability only triggers once each turn. So that would be once on our turn, and if we can trigger it, once on our opponent's turn as well. And then for 7 mana, elves we control get +2/+2 and gain Death Touch until end of turn. This effect can be activated numerous times in a turn as long as we have the mana to do so. The Death Touch also makes it difficult for your opponent to have any meaningful blocks, as it's likely that their creatures will be destroyed as well. At 2 mana, we have Leaf Crown Visionary. This 1/1 elf is a Lord, giving our other elves +1/+1. And then whenever we cast an elf spell, we can pay 1 green and draw a card. So using all of our mana dorks in conjunction with this card, we were able to continue to dig for our win conditions and also help build up a very large board very quickly. And then synergizing with all of our lords that tap for mana based on the number of creatures we have on board, we're running 4 copies of Wirewood Symbiote. This 1 mana 1/1 is not an elf, it's an insect, but it allows us to return an elf to our hand, and then we can untap target creature. Each Wirewood Symbiote can only activate this ability once each turn. Notably, this can be once on our turn and once on our opponent's turn. Usually what we're looking to do here is pick up a cheap creature such as one of the Elvish Mystic or Llanowar Elves and untap one of our better mana dorks such as the Priest of Titania or the Archdruid, which tap for multiple mana. Then we can recast the cheap card as well as continue to cast other cards from our hand. This, paired in conjunction with the Leaf Crown, can allow us to continue to play out creatures and draw cards. And then if we play a second or third symbiote, we can continue the chain. Notably, the Wirewood symbiote also acts as some minor built-in protection for our elves. If we haven't activated its ability yet and our opponent uses a targeted removal spell on one of them, we do have the option to pick up the elf to protect it. This could, however, set us back significantly in tempo. For card advantage, we have 4 copies of Collected Company. This 4-mana instant lets us look at the top 6 cards of our library, and then we can put up to 2 creature cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. This allows us to hit pretty much every creature in our deck. Notably, we usually cast this on our opponent's turn as well, so cards like Elvish Warmaster can get an additional trigger for generating a token. This is also a good way to protect some of our mana dorks from removal, as most sweepers are sorcery speed, so we can get some creatures into play at our opponent's end step and then try and combo off on the following turn. And then lastly, we have our small tutor package, which is our last win condition in the deck, and that would be 2 copies of Formidable Speaker. This 3-mana 2/4 from the recent Lorwyn set lets us discard a card when it comes into play, and if we do, we can search our library for any creature card, reveal it, and put it in our hand. Most of the time, we will be searching up our Craterhoof with this, but occasionally it can be used to grab a different card if we already have the hoof in hand. And then its second ability can also be relevant. For 1 mana, we can tap it, and then we can untap another target permanent. So this allows us to untap one of our mana dorks that is mana positive, such as the Priest and the Archdruid, to have a big boost in mana. And then the last creature in the deck is the Craterhoof Behemoth. We're only running 1 copy since we can tutor for it or use our card draw to just dig for it naturally. And this is an 8-mana 5/5 with haste. And when it enters the battlefield, all creatures we control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures we control. Based on these stats and what our opponent has for blockers, you really only need 4 or 5 creatures to deal lethal. And then obviously if they have more blockers or potential removal spells, you might need a few more creatures on the battlefield to successfully get through, but it usually doesn't take much. And the trample means that, when you have a wide board and you pump up all your creatures, you can usually just smash through for lethal. And then we're only running 20 lands in the deck because we do have so many mana dorks. 20 might even be a bit more than you need, but we do want to be able to get up to 3 mana consistently so that we can play out our cards. Before we jump into the gameplay, I do want to take a look at some cards I have over here in the sideboard, some of which are cards that used to be a staple in the elf deck and could still reasonably be slotted in if you don't have some of these rares in your card pool. So starting off the list, we have Dwennan's Elite. This 2-mana 2/2 creates an additional 1/1 elf warrior token creature when it comes into play if you control another elf. So this is a good way to create a wide board early. Elvish Clan Caller was a lord that used to be played before the Craterhoof package became real popular. This 2-mana 1/1 can also be tapped for 6 mana, and we can go search our library for an additional copy and put it onto the battlefield. Elvish Visionary is a card that is used with the Wirewood symbiote when you pick up a creature to untap your mana dork. The Elvish Visionary is a prime target, since when we recast it, we would also get to draw an additional card. Circle of Dreams Druid was another one of these super mana dorks that adds a green for each creature we control. For the brief time period where Orcish Bowmaster was legal, this kind of fell off as it died to the Bowmaster ping. And then we got Priest of Titania, which was a 2-mana version of this card, and so it kind of fell off a bit. But similar to the Archdruid, if you had a Mystic or Llanowar Elves in play, you could very easily play this on turn 2. The Fierce Empath used to be the creature used to tutor up your Craterhoof. However, the Formidable Speaker is potentially more powerful than this. A lot of times, if you drew multiple empaths, the second one wouldn't be able to tutor up anything useful. And additionally, the Formidable Speaker is a better body at 2/4 as opposed to 1/1. The only downside to the Speaker is that you do need to have a card in hand to discard if you want to use its tutor ability. Whereas Empath, if you had no cards in hand, you'd still be able to go get your Craterhoof Behemoth. So this is one thing that we'll be taking a look at in the games to see if we notice the downside. Freylease Skyshroud Partisan was a planeswalker that saw play in the Elves deck. Similar to some of our other untap effects, its +1 allowed us to untap an elf, and then a random elf in our hand perpetually gained +1/+1. This allowed you to untap your super mana dorks and advance your board state. Its -1 ability lets you seek an elf card if your hand was light and you needed more action. And then if you did get up to 6 loyalty, you're able to conjure a card named Regal Force to the battlefield. And this is a 5/5 creature, and when it enters, you get to draw a card for each green creature you control. And as our deck does go quite wide, it would oftentimes draw 5+ cards when it entered. Doesn't see as much play anymore now that we have other ways to untap our lords. And also, it doesn't really synergize well with Collected Company, as it is not a creature to hit. Imperious Perfect is a 3-mana 2/2 lord, and then for 1 green, you can tap it and create a green elf creature token. This card saw some play back in the day, allowing you to build a wide board and also pump up your team. Notably, it doesn't see as much play anymore because instead of trying to use lords to pump your team, the deck does try to use activated abilities and the Craterhoof now. Marwyn the Nurturer is another mana dork. This 3-mana 1/1 states that whenever another elf we control enters, we get to put a 1/1 counter on it, and then we can tap it to add amount of green equal to its power. This synergizes well with other lords as well, since they give it additional power, which let it generate more mana. This can easily be substituted for some of the cards such as Archdruid if you don't have them in your collection. Tyvar the Pumbler, 3-mana 3/3 legendary elf. You can tap another untapped creature we control and give Tyvar indestructible until end of turn, and it gets tapped. And then more notably, its second ability for 5 mana, creatures we control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control. So this is another way we could pump our team to try and swing for lethal combat damage. Beast Whisperer is a 4-mana 2/3, and whenever we cast a creature spell, we get to draw a card. So this is another way that the deck can gain card advantage if you're not playing the Leaf Crown Visionary for card draw. Notably, at 4 mana, Collected Company would not be able to hit it. Dionysus Elvish Archdruid, this 4-mana 3/3 states that elves we control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped during your turn, untap it and put a 1/1 counter on it. And then this ability triggers only once each turn. So this can give your creatures pseudo-vigilance, because when they attack, they get to untap themselves. It also helps scale your team. And then notably, this synergizes very well with your mana dorks, because if you don't have any good attacks, you can still tap them to add mana, and then they'll untap and grow, potentially giving you a better attack on future turns. And it also lets you activate their mana abilities twice in one turn using the Archdruid's untap ability. Also at 4 mana, Lise Elena Huntsmaster. This 3/3 elf states that whenever we cast an elf spell, we get to create a 1/1 elf token, helping us go wide. At 4 mana, there's also Moon Vigil Adherence. This is a 0/0 creature that gets +1/+1 for each creature we control and each other creature in our graveyard. And then it also has Trample. So as we're building a big wide board, the Moon Vigil will grow in size as well. And then if your opponent has removal or a board wipe, the creatures in your graveyard will also count towards the Vigil size. Notably, the tokens that the deck generates won't. So, if your opponent casts a board wipe and you had half of your creatures as tokens, the Vigil won't be quite as powerful. And then the last card that could potentially see some action is the Selfless Safe Right. This is a 5 mana 4/2 with flash, and it also has Convoke, meaning we can tap our untapped creatures to help pay for the spell. And when it enters, we get to choose a creature type, which will be elf, and then other permanents with control of that type gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, meaning this card has some potential against board wipes. I haven't tried it yet in any decks, but if we're matching up against a lot of control strategies, I might rebuild the deck with a few copies and see how useful it seems. Notably, you do need to have 5 mana and or creatures available to use this card, which could be the prohibiting factor in Historic, whereas in Standard this might see a bit more play due to the slower nature of the format. Before we jump into the gameplay, I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe to the video. It really helps the channel. And without further ado, let's jump into the games. This hand is good. Ramps into Priest. Then we have Speaker to dig for our hoof. Doesn't matter which elf we start on. Play out Titania and our other elf for ramp. Then our opponent concedes. If they're on a elf deck, they're already too far behind. If our opponent doesn't have any removal, this is a turn 2 Archdruid. Have some ramp from our opponent's side of the field. They cycle their Gaia's Blessing. We'll play out the Archdruid and pass. Next turn we can Collected Company, then we'll see where to go from there based on what we hit. Some kind of domain deck from our opponent. So here we'll make sure to leave the Archdruid untapped. We can grab the Wirewood and the Speaker. We'll discard our second Speaker and go get our Crater Hoof. Then we can play out our Mystic. Untap our Archdruid, picking up a Mystic. Then with 5 mana here, we can play out the Mystic again and Collected Company. And we'll grab 2 Priests. So now we're just trying to dodge a board wipe. And our opponent does have it. So we can pick up the Speaker and try and start rebuilding. Actually, might as well just pick up the Titania. We'll play it back out. That does set us back significantly. And they hit in a track, so I think this one is pretty much done. Board wipes are the bane of the existence of the elf deck. It's almost impossible to win here. We see our opponent also has Brotherhood's End, Leyline Binding. So it would have been a very tough matchup for us. And Forest off the top won't do it. This hand is fine. We do need a top end card. As a weenie deck, being on the draw is one of the worst things that can happen to us. Even though we do have a built-in combo finish, the deck really does significantly better on the play. Red deck from our opponent, all we can do is run out the elves. Hope they're on goblins. It does look like burn though. So pretty much whatever we play out here is probably going to die. We can lead on the War Master and try and go wide. I think that's what we'll do. Next turn, we can play out the Leaf Crown, and that will increase our damage if our opponent doesn't have another Alchemist to block with. They did not kill any of our creatures. We'll start off on the Leaf Crown. We get to draw a card here. And then we'll pass the turn. Unfortunately, we don't have Symbiote in play to protect our Titania. Festivities will almost wipe our board. We'll be left with the War Master. And then they have the Lightning Bolt. Another tough matchup. Second board wipe. This hand is okay. We do have the Titania, but we'd like to draw into a token generator or collected company or something of the sort. Our opponent with a very aggressive start here. We'll play out the Titania and the Llanowar Elves. Next turn, we can play out both of the Shepherds, see what else we draw into. So this does look like it's going to be Lotus Field combo. They're going to try and just continually recur all the lands from their graveyard until they can burn us out. Unfortunately, we could play out the Hoof here, but that would be our whole turn. Shepherds are free to play with Titania, and we can activate them. Hit for 10, so our opponent needs to win next turn, or wipe the board. They are looking at their graveyard, so they're trying to see if they have critical mass enough to combo off. I think they probably need another Lotus Field. Depends what's in their hand. 5 mana showing right now. They can play 2 more lands from hand at the moment. This will probably search up another Lotus Field. Crop rotation is the same thing. Making red mana, we don't want to see that. And they have another from hand already, but they don't have a payoff, so they were just wasting time. This is a very fair hand. We'll give it a try on the play. If our opponent has removal for our Mystic, our turn 2 will likely be the same anyway, so we're not relying on it for our current curve. Looks like it could be the Wizards deck from our opponent. We'll start on the Leaf Crown. Our opponent might choose to use removal on that instead of the Mystic, and then we'd be able to Collected Company next turn. We don't want to just hang out the War Master by itself without getting additional value right away. Second DRC from our opponent. And they use a Faithless Looting, so our Leaf Crown will make it around the board. They mill over some removal. Another board wipe means they likely have one in hand already. So this looks like it is going to most likely be a loss as well. Notably, in decks like this, Cinderclasm is not normal, which means that the matchmaker is intentionally pitting us against decks that are strong against ours. Our opponent is on some form of mill strategy. Here we can attack in with the Leaf Crown, see if they want to take the trade. And they do. We'll happily take that. And then we'll pass the turn. Since there's likely a board wipe incoming, we don't want to play out the Collected Company early. And 2 Lords also would not have saved the Leaf Crown. They'll be looking for a way to double the amount of cards milled. So they're getting rid of quite a few lands here. And then they'll play a looting. The DRC has to attack, so they won't have any blockers back on defense. And they've already played their land, so we should be safe to Collected Company as soon as they discard. We'll take the 2 mana dorks, Archdruid and Titania. Should have a pretty big turn this turn. Start on the Leaf Crown. Then we'll play out the War Master and draw a card. Here we can use Titania, play out another Titania, draw a card. We'll play out the Symbiote. Here we can untap the Titania, pick up the War Master. Play out the War Master, draw a card. Play out the Archdruid, draw a card. Play out the Symbiote. Untap the Priest, pick up the War Master. Play out the War Master, draw a card. Play out the Elf, draw a card. Looks like that is where we run out of creatures. If we activate the War Master here, we won't have any creatures to attack. So we just hit with the Titania for 4. And we should have lethal on board if our opponent can't interact with us. Looks like we did enough to get over the finish line there. Alright, so there you have the first 5 games in this series. The deck just felt okay. We went up against 3 board wipe strategies and ended up winning 1 of the 3. And then against the 2 fair decks, I think we won pretty easily. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the Wirewood Symbiote Leaf Crown combo, where you dig for additional cards and you untap your mana dorks and continue to dig that way. Leaves too much variance for my liking. So I'm going to grab some of these cards from the sideboard. We'll rebuild the deck and play a few more games, and then we can compare how the versions did. All right, so I went back to the drawing board and came up with this second version of the deck that we're going to try today. The cards that we added were 4 copies of Circle of Dreams Druid. This 3 mana 2/1 elf is another one of the super dorks that adds 1 green for each creature that we control. Then we brought in 4 copies of Dionysus Elvish Archdruid. This 4 mana 3/3 legendary creature is the one that untaps each one of our creatures once per turn. And whenever we untap it, we put a 1/1 counter on it. And then the last card that we brought in was one copy of Lee's Elena Huntmaster. This 4 mana 3/3 generates an elf token each time we cast an elf spell. Since we brought in another super mana dork and a way to untap our creatures, what we substituted out were the 4 copies of Wirewood Symbiote, the 1 copy of Raphelos, and since 5 of the cards that we brought in are no longer hittable with Collectible Company, we also shaved those from the deck as well. So these changes are aimed at bringing in more mana dorks and then using the Dionys to untap our creatures. This can still allow us to combo off with the Leaf Crown Visionary, and we still have the Elvish Warmaster and Allosaur Shepherd, as well as the Craterhoof package to pump our team for victory. Since we're no longer playing Raphello, we can also change around the mana base a little bit. We're still running 20 lands, but we brought in an additional 4 copies of Cavern of Souls, which lets us choose a creature type when it enters the battlefield, and then it can either add 1 generic mana or it can add 1 mana of any color used to cast the creature type that we selected, and that creature can't be countered. We brought in 1 copy of Boseiju Who Endures. This legendary land taps for green, and then we can also channel it to destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land our opponent controls, and then they can search for a land card with a basic land type and put it on the battlefield. Notably, this is cost reduced for each legendary creature we control, and we do have one in the deck, so we can potentially play this for 1 mana if needed. And lastly, we brought in 2 copies of Bridgeworks Battle, which can be used as a removal spell if needed, and additionally can be played as a bolt land. All of the mana sources in our deck can be played on turn 1 to cast any of our cards, and then now there's a few of them with some additional utility. So let's jump into the second set of games here and see if this is indeed an upgrade over the previous deck. This hand is heavily reliant on the Elvish Mystic surviving turn 1. I think a good number of our hands are going to be like that, so we'll have to keep it. And we're up against goblins, it appears. Doesn't really matter which land we start on. Our opponent is unlikely to have counter spells, and most decks aren't running any type of land destruction either in the format that we care about. We'll run out the worst of the 2. Circle of Dreams Druid is not a lord, so it doesn't pump our team. A House Squad giving our opponent's goblins haste. Next turn we could already be facing down a hasty Muxus. We will play out our Lord here. And then with the 4 mana, I think we do search up our Craterhoof. That way if our opponent doesn't kill us next turn, we can threaten lethal on the crackback. With the Prospector, our opponent could likely dump out their entire hand here. They start with a Wartrief, using up a lot of their mana. Shrine to Nyx taps for 4, but they need 2 to activate it. And that will reduce the amount it taps for, because they'll have to sacrifice one of their real creatures. So I think they might have miscounted a little bit. They play out the mob boss. That generates 3 tokens, so now they're up to 6 mana. They can still play Muxus and have the War Chief for haste. Instead, it's a Shalak Mons. They choose not to activate it, so here we'll be able to play out our Crater Hoof. And our opponent concedes. So with Pashalik Mons, it's whenever a goblin they control dies, so they could have sacrificed some of their creatures here to take out our Archdruid, and after sacrificing 2 creatures, they would only need to sacrifice 1 to take out the Circle of Dreams Druid, and that could have at least kept them alive another turn or 2. This hand is good. We'll start out on our Mystic. Opponent has taken 1 mulligan. And they start with a Tameo.
Perhaps there are more useful texts down on the surface.
We'll play out our Titania and pass. It has the highest upside if it survives. And our opponent appears to be on a painter deck. They paint everything green. So we'll play out our Cavern. Then we can start on War Master. We'll draw a card here. And then we'll draw a second card. So we're presenting lethal next turn, and our opponent already concedes. This hand is good. It does have 2 lands and a bunch of mana dorks. Formidable Speaker can dig for the Crater Hoof if needed. I'd love to see a Llanowar or Elves from our opponent, or Elvish Mystic here. It does appear to be an Elf mirror match. Titania will get tremendous value. This is one of the cases where we might use the Bridgeworks battle to remove one of our opponent's creatures. Three mana from our opponent, and they are actually playing a Gruul deck of some sort, not an Elf deck. So if we play out the Speaker here, we can discard the Bridgeworks battle and go grab our Crater Hoof. Then we'll play out our Leaf Crown and pass the turn. If our opponent doesn't remove our Titania here, we can present lethal. They must have just top decked that, otherwise they would have played it out last turn. And seeing as how they didn't remove our priest, I'm pretty confident it will survive. Although, a bit of an odd sequence there. I think if they had Bone Crusher, they should have stomped it last turn instead of playing out the Phoenix. Now we are looking for another way to produce mana. No good attacks on the ground due to the Formidable Speaker. So they just hit for 2. And there is another Lord. We can draw a card. And we will play out the land here. Next turn we're threatening lethal again. And our opponent concedes. This hand is good, assuming the Mystic survives. Still looking to see the Dionys in action. Esper Sentinel, not very useful against our deck. Are they on the Ars build? Could be hammer. We'll see what they grab. They do indeed get the hammer. So this is going to be a close game, I think. We'll start off on the leaf crown. Then we can draw a card with the shepherd, I think. We'll play out the priest, draw another card. And then we'll just play out the elves. If our opponent doesn't kill us here, I believe we are threatening lethal on the crackback. They play out another blocker. And Kemba will reduce the cost of hammer. And our opponent concedes. This hand is good. We'll start off with the Llanowar Elves, and if it survives, we'll play the Archdruid on turn 2. We'll keep the Cavern of Souls a secret for the time being, just in case our opponent is playing a counterspell deck. It looks like they don't have an answer for Archdruid and concede. This hand is heavily reliant on top decking an additional land. We have about a 1 in 3 chance of drawing one each turn, so probably about 50%. We'll give it a try. It's a pretty good hand if we get it. Inquisition, what it takes will be heavily dependent on what's in our opponent's hand. They take one of our higher curve cards and they'll just be planning on getting rid of the Llanowar Elves, and that looks like what they're doing. So I don't expect this to survive. We did miss the first land drop. Thoughtseize here. Interesting to see what they take. Our 4 drops are likely not to get cast very soon, so either the Speaker or the War Master would be my pick. They don't agree. Here we could use the Speaker to go get a Mana Dork. I think we are just going to leave it on one of the War Masters. If our opponent doesn't remove it, we will start to be able to generate tokens. They might be on a discard deck. No immediate play from our opponent. Here we could either play out the War Master that they know about, or we could try the Titania. I think we'll try the Titania. It has the highest upside. And then there's no need to attack here in case our opponent has a flash creature. They use the Rider immediately. I don't know if that's the right call. Priest of Titania is much better than the War Master.
We all have things we'd rather forget.
And here I think we're going to get rid of the Speaker. It's not likely that we'll have multiple creatures to stay in our hand. We'll be able to play out both of these here. It doesn't matter which order we play them in. Then we'll mark 2 damage on the Lyanna. If they plus her, they'll be the only ones discarding. And if they minus her, then we'll sacrifice a token and she'll be dead. Meat hook for 2. We'll kill everything except for the Elise. And then our opponent has a choice whether to sacrifice the Lyanna to get rid of it. And they do.
I've always hated
So now we are rebuilding. Our opponent has the Murderous Rider in Adventure that they can play out. Unfortunately, we are not drawing any of our creatures to start rebuilding yet. They also have the Hive to pressure us. Don't think we even play out the Priest yet. Our opponent has not been playing their cards, so they're likely removal. They also didn't attack in with the Hive Tyrant, and then we see some more discard. This is why we held on to the battle. We can discard it to the Liliana.
No more distractions.
Let's make this quick.
Drop it.
Our opponent also might have been sandbagging some cards to discard to the Liliana. We drew another land card. Now we'll play out the Priest because we're going to have to discard it anyway. And there is the removal. We do need to top deck into something before Liliana gets to ultimate. And I don't even think that matters. They can answer 2 of our creatures and we'll be dead. Lost to another board wipe. This hand is a bit too slow. Turn 2 Priest. We'll give it a try. This is also a slow hand though. So we'll start on the Shepherd. Here we can attack in. Didn't seem like our opponent had a response, so we'll play out the Titania. Indicates that they don't have a instant speed removal spell. Still not quite sure what our opponent is playing. This will give us a better hint. They are on a sliver deck potentially. We will start on the Leaf Crown. Then here we'll play out another one of our mana dorks and draw a card. And we can attack with the Shepherd past the Automaton. Five mana. Ah, a demon deck. So they're just naming Sliver to throw us off the scent. We can play out the Leaf Crown first. We'll draw a card. Here we'll play out the Dionys. We will not use the Leaf Crown ability because we want to be able to untap the Archdruid. Then we can use the Speaker to go get our Craterhoof. And we can pay. Craterhoof is 8 mana, so we need 2 remaining. We'll discard our duplicate legendary creature and go grab the Craterhoof. And we'll see if this is lethal. Looks like it should be. Good game. This hand is good. We'll lead off on one of our mana dorks. Doesn't matter which one. A green deck from our opponent as well. Play out Circle of Dreams Druid. Here we see some white mana. Could be an Aura's deck. Play out the Leaf Ground first. Then we can draw a card here. 4 mana. I think we just play them both out without drawing. Go grab our Crater Hoof. And our opponent concedes. So there you have the second version of the deck. Based on the gameplay, it does seem like it is still susceptible to board wipes, but honestly, in Historic, you don't really come across as many board wipe strategies since there's so much more combo in the format. This version definitely felt a bit more explosive, with the additional mana dorks being able to have more redundancy in the deck. The game where the Dionys popped off with our mana dorks felt extremely strong, and Crater Hoof was easily able to finish out some of the games. We didn't get to play out Lee's Elena Huntmaster, so I can't evaluate the token generation from that card based on our current gameplay. One thing that will be consistent with all of the Elves decks is that they are going to be susceptible to extremely fast combo, such as Minion the Mighty decks or the Persist combo deck that can win on turn 2. But against any type of fair or semi-fair strategy, it stands a pretty good chance of winning. With the redundancy in this specific build of the deck, even if your opponent has a few spot removal spells, you should be able to power through it. Decks that are playing predominantly removal, this will also struggle with, just merely based on the fact that it does require a critical mass of creatures in order to win the game. But outside of that, this version did feel pretty strong. I do think it was an improvement over the first deck that I played, and I do look forward to playing the deck again and seeing how it evolves in the current meta. As always, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content.